Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here Wednesday, July 9th. Right now, we're talking about some regrets I have from the Jaguars offseason, and really it's just kind of about some personnel decisions at certain spots. We've talked about all these things before, but as the offseason winds down and training camp is under 2 weeks away, getting out on the practice field is, I think, exactly 2 weeks away from today. But there's just some spots where, for a team that I think clearly is not in this kind of wait and see rebuild year, let's just see what we've got in our first year on the job. This is a new regime that, with Liam Cohen, James Gladstone, and Tony Baselli, this is a team aggressively trying to win their division and make the playoffs and compete at the highest level, in my opinion, in year one. And some of their free agent moves, to me, left a lot to be desired, or lack of moves in certain spots. I just think that the Jaguars could have been more aggressive. Certain areas of their roster that they could have been more aggressive while also not really changing the future outlook of some positions. We'll talk about like what I mean exactly here today. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. You can also check out genjag.com/shop, where we have brand new t-shirt, Cool Cats tee. Check it out, genjag.com/shop. So the Jaguars, there's basically three positions where I really would have liked to see them be more aggressive this offseason, not just via free agency, but it could have been a combination of free agency and the draft. And there's a lot of moves they made that I really liked. I like what they did at backup tight end. I probably wouldn't have gotten rid of Evan Ingram, but I do like Britton Strange, and I do like the plan at tight end. Like, they're shifting what the tight end's role is in this offense, and I understand that Evan Ingram didn't really fit that. I still probably would have tried to keep him just because I think he's such a talented receiving threat and one of the guys you really would like to have on your roster from a leadership standpoint. But that's not one of my bigger things. Safety is certainly a big one. And look, the Jaguars, as of right now, they still have $18.8 million in 2025 salary cap. Could they use that to upgrade a certain spot during the season if they need to? Before the season, if they need to. Yes, there are still some good players at certain spots where if they feel like they could use an upgrade, maybe they could be available via trade during the season, or there's still some older veteran free agents that are still out there that could potentially help you out, right? But with $18.8 million remaining in team salary cap space, they could have still had some flexibility while making some of the moves that I would have liked to seen them make. And these aren't just hindsight. Like, these are things I wanted the Jaguars to do at the time that they didn't end up doing. I can understand arguments for what the Jaguars did versus what I would have liked to seen them do, but it is what it is. These are kind of my regrets, some spots where I think the Jaguars could have been a lot better heading into the 2025 season. Safety, for one. I really like Caleb Branshaw pick, so I'm not knocking that at all. You could have had Xavier Watts at that same pick. I can understand the argument for Caleb Branshaw over Xavier Watts. I think he's a better tackler. I think he's a better athlete. I think there's more upside. Xavier Watts, is a ball hawk who's going to be fairly consistent at the next level, I think. So that's an interesting argument, but more so than that, because, again, I'm very happy about Caleb Branshaw. I think that was actually a really heady pick and a good pick. I would have liked to seen them be more aggressive with their free agency addition at safety. And they went and they got Eric Murray, who's going to start for them. He'll be on the roster for the next 2 years based on his contract. It's a 3-year deal, a little under $7 million per year, which obviously is very low for a starting safety, but it is starting safety money. I just think that they could have, instead of getting somebody who might play at like a sufficient starter level or a replacement level starter in Eric Murray, which I think he is a replacement level starter. They could have gone and pursued a Javon Holland, who openly like lauded and gave the Jaguars credit for hiring Anthony Campanile, who was a defensive coach on staff for Miami for 3 years when Javon Holland was there. And maybe Anthony Campanile is a reason they didn't bring in Javon Holland. Maybe he didn't love Javon Holland as much as Javon Holland loved him. But to me, that's a player who, when you start looking around at having a Javon Holland, a Travis Hunter, Tyson Campbell, Caleb Branshaw, you're starting to talk about a potentially really game-changing secondary along with Jordan Lewis. And I just don't see that upside here with the current group. I think Javon Holland, he signed for right around $15 million per year, 15.1. So that is over double what Eric Murray got, but he signed a 3-year deal. So let's say you signed Javon Holland instead of Eric Murray, right? Eric Murray this year has a cap hit of what is it? $3.6 million, about half of what his average annual value is for his deal. Little over half. You add another $3.5 million, and that's Javon Holland's cap hit for you if you structure the contract the same way. And so you're talking about only $3.5 million on the cap compared to Javon Holland. That's the savings you're getting for Eric Murray. I don't see that, and I don't understand that, quite frankly. I don't. And I've talked to y'all about, why the Jaguars like Eric Murray, why they think he can work as a starting safety for them, all those things. But the bottom line is he has been a stopgap option for his entire career. And yeah, he's made plays. He's been parts of good defenses. But to me, there's a reason the Texans were ready to let him walk and replace him. I think Javon Holland would have been a really good signing. And if you didn't love Javon Holland, how about Justin Reed, who signed for just over $10 million per year? And he's a guy who absolutely brings it from a hitting standpoint, coming downhill. So those are a couple of the guys, that I really would have liked to see in free agency for the Jaguars at safety. And I think that if you had those guys, you could have a higher ceiling. A lot of safeties in the draft I would have liked. Upton Stout was a safety/cornerback out of Western Kentucky I liked, who went later on. Billy Bowman went later on. He struggles to tackle at this point, but unbelievable ball hawk. So I think there's kind of some similarities to Cam Kinchin's there for the Rams last year. I just think the Jaguars could have done more at safety to put themselves in a position to not just have decent play, but excellent play from their secondary. Interior offensive line's another spot. If y'all been paying attention, I wish they would have pursued more aggressively. I like the Patrick McCary signing a lot. I like the draft pick of Wyatt Milam a lot. If you're signing Patrick McCary and you're telling me he's going to start at center or right guard, I'm okay with that. I'm happy with that. I love his attitude. I love the way he plays the game. I would almost rather him at center. But regardless, you should have done something more than the Robert Hainsey one. And again, Robert Hainsey kind of similar to Eric Murray in terms of his status at that position. Robert Hainsey is center, Eric Murray is safety. Not comparing the players, but comparing where they are in terms of the tier ranking of where they would be amongst their competition at their position. I think that Robert Hainsey is a replacement level starter in this league. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he plays his ass off. I hope the same thing about Eric Murray. But that's just what history has kind of shown me and what their tape has kind of shown me. The Jaguars have, I think everything is pointing to them running a lot of zone stuff. Obviously, you saw Liam Cohen's going to do whatever works. He last year came in with the idea of running more zone concepts and ended up having a more gap power oriented team running the ball. I think Drew Dahlman would have been a great get. I think if you didn't like Drew Dahlman as much and you wanted somebody more balanced, more experienced, Ryan Kelly, there's a lot of centers you could have, guards you could have pursued, which again would lead you to Patrick McCary playing center, which he's played more than he's played right guard. So I just wish they were more aggressive in free agency at that spot. And I thought there was actually, significantly better, higher upside options than what they did with, Fred Johnson and Chuma Edoga. Tevin Jenkins to me would have been a great option as a competition, like real competition level guy. If you wanted to push some guys at guard or tackle, I think Tevin Jenkins would have been fun. I think they could have drafted a Charles Grant. After they drafted Wyatt Milam, I had him rated a little higher than Wyatt Milam. I still do like Wyatt Milam a lot. I think he's going to be a good player. But these are just some of the things I would have done differently. And I don't even want to say that I would have done Wyatt Milam differently. I think that was a good pick. I think it was a smart pick. I think he fits their culture very well. But definitely the way they handled free agency, interior offensive line, outside of the Patrick McCary signing, left a little bit to be desired in my mind. And then finally, the defensive line. Look, I love Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker. I think that's a great baseline to start and build your edge group around and build your defensive line group around. I think Mason Smith has a bright future ahead of him. I think Eric Armstead has a chance to, get back to close to what he was before he arrived in Jacksonville as an interior defensive lineman, not an edge 3. I think that the numbers kind of bear that out when he's rushing from the interior. He did a good job last year. I think he'll do a good job again in that regard this year. An even better job, quite frankly. I think Devon Hamilton has a chance to regain his status as a big-time interior, kind of like nose tackle. I wish there was one more kind of young guy to get excited about on the interior of the defensive line, which would have been, a draft pick, some point, late day 2, early day 3, whatever it may be. I kind of, as much as I like Bashal Tutin's potential and I like Jack Kaiser, I probably would have gone in different directions there. I know those are guys they really like. They value their personality, their intangibles, their skill sets. Those are a couple spots I probably would have said, like, let's go get an interior defensive lineman that we think has the chance to be a real problem penetration-wise. Let's go get an edge player who has a chance to be a really good rotational guy. And I like Jalen McLeod, who they drafted a little bit later. And I like, what they did in free agency after the draft at edge. But I would like one more young guy on the interior for sure. Like Aeneas Peebles and Ty Robinson really stand out to me as potential disruptors on the interior that got drafted later on day 3. And then free agency wise, while I like Emmanuel Ogbah and DeJuan Smoot and Dennis Gardeck if he's able to get healthy, no shocker here, but 2 guys the Eagles signed are guys that I was advocating for the Jaguars to sign at edge as an edge 3. And now the Eagles have both of them. And they got them for pennies on the dollar. They signed Azeez Ojulari for $3 million, 1-year deal. Could have got him for nothing, essentially. And then they signed Josh Uche. What did Uche get? $1.92 million. You tell me you could have Josh Uche and Azeez Ojulari, 2 guys who have excelled in these types of roles, for a lot less. Now, one thing that might tell me is maybe they just wanted some bigger dudes because DeJuan Smoot and Emmanuel Ogbah are much bigger. But Dennis Gardeck's not. So I don't really know what the plan is there. I like Ogbah and I like Smoot. I would be much more juiced up if it was Uche and Azeez Ojulari. or if one of those guys was here. I would. I like the spot they're in with their edge depth. I would love the spot they're in with their edge depth if one or both of those guys was here in Jacksonville. I think they both have just such good ability to be high impact rotational pass rushers. And so that's where we're at. Those are spots I really wish the Jaguars looked to improve more. The interior of the offensive line, the safety spot, and defensive line depth and youth. I think could have been a lot of fun. But I still think the Jaguars are in a spot to compete for their division. I think they're in a spot to be competitive week in and week out. A lot of it's going to depend on the coaching. We're expecting massive improvements in coaching on the offensive side of the ball with Liam Cohen and Grant Udinski and company. We're expecting the skill positions to just look a lot better. Travis Hunter being the massive addition. Brian Thomas Jr. going into year 2. The running backs theoretically having a better situation from a play calling and design standpoint. Defensively, you're working with a lot of the same pieces. But, again, add in Travis Hunter. Add in a healthy Tyson Campbell. Jordan Lewis. We'll see how it plays out. I still have the Jaguars second in their division behind the Houston Texans. I think they can compete for the division. I think that the Texans have a glaring weakness of their own we've talked about on the offensive line. If I was doing a show about the Texans, that'd be where I'd be talking about, regrets of the offseason. But these are kind of my regrets for the Jaguars offseason, and I hope they don't come back to bite the Jags. And I hope the guys that they did elect to pursue at these spots end up really panning out and outperforming my expectations. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe, and y'all have a good one.